We want to end this lecture by looking at some of the strategies employed by individuals and small groups to exploit or otherwise take advantage of contemporary information ecosystems to create a benefit for some or to disadvantage others with regard to information. Now, the various exploitive strategies that we're going to look at all roughly get grouped under the rubric of fake news. But as I note, fake news is really just the blunt instrument of dull minds. It's used more often than not in a kind of ad hominem fashion to dismiss information that people don't want to acknowledge, regardless if it's truth or falsity. So we're not going to really use the notion of fake news. Instead, what we're going to do is differentiate a number of individual kinds of vehicles or platforms and talk about the nature of the threat or danger that they might pose to being well informed and to getting accurate information. And as we'll see, each of these different kinds of so-called fake news has different intents and differs in terms of the potential threat it poses to accurate and comprehensive understanding of an event. So we're going to start off with really the least offensive, probably, comedic news satire. So satirists are comedians who intend to adopt a particular perspective on the news or current events, and they're doing so for comedic purposes. So they're primarily entertainers at heart. And in fact, when Jon Stewart used to be the anchor of The Daily Show, he used to have to remind people on a regular basis that despite how people wanted to portray him as someone who was a political commentator or a news person, he was in fact a quote-unquote comedian. Now, comedic news satire in the form of, say, websites like The Onion, TV shows like The Daily Show, or Last Week Tonight, these are all attempts at entertainment based on playing off current events. And though they're often written by well-informed people and even extensively fact-checked, there are certain limitations to this as a medium for getting information. Specifically, comedians don't need to know or adhere to any journalistic practices. They don't have to worry about whether or not they absolutely positively get it right. There are no codified professional ethical standards, and they don't even really have to believe their own material. Likewise, news satirists generally lack the resources to conduct independent investigative research on the topics they cover. And so what they tend to do is to use reports of current events, which they then create a comedic bit about. Now, this isn't to say that all of the information in comedic news satire is in fact inaccurate, or the people who are the consumers of comedic news satire are, as a group, relatively uninformed. This was a study. It was done in 2012, so quite a long time ago. And it looked at people's knowledge of current events, and it correlated that with their own reports of the sorts of news that they consumed. And so you can see here on the left, if you look at highly educated regular New Yorker and Economist readers, right, they were at the top here of the scores on knowledge of current events. But not so far down here, right below USA Today, is The Daily Show and The Colbert Report, which was a satire show that followed The Daily Show featuring Stephen Colbert. And they're above Hardball, news program on MSNBC, O'Reilly Factor, which was a news program on Fox News, and so on. And you find a similar result over here on news audiences' knowledge of current events, where, let's see here, The Daily Show comes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th out of all of the news organizations that were covered. So comedic news satire needn't be inaccurate information, but they don't have to intend to give you accurate information. They tend to exaggerate and use hyperbole for comedic effect. They have no, in general, journalistic training, no codified professional ethical standards. They tend to lack resources, and so they potentially can mislead you in ways that may not be blameworthy, but are certainly nevertheless undesirable from an epistemic perspective. In the next module, we'll turn to amateur reporting.